Hi, everybody. I am Rick DiClemente coming to you with Astrology Unplugged with my special guest, Stephen Poplin, coming to us from Iowa. Stephen and I have known each other about 18 years, and I'm really thrilled that I got to reconnect with him. This is mainly an astrology show. Stephen's also a very fine astrologer, but Stephen's mainly a hypnotist, a regressive hypnotist. He does a lot of work following up with the work of Michael Newton and in the footsteps of Edgar Cayce. I mean, I'm going to turn much of the program over to him. I don't know how I found him. I was living near D.C. I had a reading with him about 18 years ago, and I knew his name started with P.O., and I couldn't remember. And for years, I tried to recall, and luckily we found his name written somewhere, and it's all guided by the stars. So welcome aboard, Mr. Poplin.
Thank you, Rick. It's nice to be here. Nice to reconnect after all these years, too.
Very nice, and it's so nice to have you. You've read his bio. I'm going to show you some of his some text here that will show you his recent book. Part 1, this is the book that you can get through, I guess, his website or through Amazon. There's his website. There's the book Part 1, and I understand Stephen is just about done with Part 2. And I'm just going to tell you something before I go to him. I've been around a little bit, and I've seen people do this and that. Stephen is really, really experienced, and he doesn't take you somewhere unless he knows where it is. He's very comfortable, just excellent. And I want to welcome you, and I would like for you to tell us a little bit about your practice, Stephen.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Yeah, that's true. I've been doing this for such a long time. I assume that a lot of the people who are tuning in are also interested or knowledgeable about astrology. So periodically, I might just throw out something astrological.
Right.
But I can say that I first got into this also when Uranus crossed my sun in Scorpio.
Wow.
And that was in the mid-70s. And so suddenly, from being in Colorado and studying philosophy, and suddenly the esoteric world started to get more and more interesting. So I got immediately into symbology, tarot cards, astrology, anything esoteric, metaphysical. And then soon after that, within 6 months of that, I took off on a trip to New York and was very curious about past lives, wondering, just out of curiosity, just how true and useful it was. And so I went and had a session with a lady, and suddenly I found myself having recollections of a couple of different past lives. That was very fascinating to me, and kind of like how interesting it is that all of that is just kind of like behind the surface of our consciousness. And then especially I was curious, how did she do that? How did she put me into this altered state of consciousness? And then I was able to make these recollections. And so very soon after that, I started reading books about hypnosis, past life regressions, and started practicing on all of my friends. And to the point, they said, "Oh, here comes Stephen. What's he going to dig into now?"
I know Stephen, for your information, is a Scorpio. He's got a very, very strong Jupiter-Uranus up in the 10th house, and he's so learned. He just dives into everything. He has a great big T-square to Neptune, which gives him tremendous intuition. Stephen, I'm so impressed. You know, the last time I had a session with you was 18 years ago, and a lot of the memories are vague. But I was so impressed this last weekend when we had a good deal of time to go together. And all I got to say is, this stuff is real. This stuff is real, and I don't want to play with tiddlywinks tonight. I want to talk about the ramifications. Since this stuff is real, what does it mean for us? And another thing is, you've been around a long time, as a lot of people have. people are really evolving. People really are, and they're ready for this stuff, especially at a time when the world is very troubled. What do you see? I want to ask you, you don't have to be that experienced of an astrologer to know that Pluto is having its way with the planet. But what do you see in terms of, I've been talking for a long time about the downside and the deconstruction of so much. At the same time as it's been going down with Pluto and Capricorn, the upside has just been getting tremendous. What are you seeing on the upside with people getting ready and people developing their abilities, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're going through a tremendous world change, and I'm really gratified to listen to some very wise souls over a period of decades, people in trance states telling me all sorts of things. And indeed, I'd have to say that the majority incarnated here upon the earth are young souls. Okay, so that could be fun with the little rascals and so forth, but sometimes they do like to take over the sandbox, and they want to get in charge in various ways. But there are simultaneously some, mature souls, older souls, very wise beings. I describe in my book a couple of times where spirit guides, really high and wise beings, have chosen to incarnate here, sometimes to accompany their charges, as it were, down here, which is very fascinating. And then every now and then I have the pleasure of meeting some of these very advanced people and being able to spend some time with them. When I come across people like that, I just kind of quietly sit and listen and just like get things rolling and just turn on the microphone and say, okay, tell me what you know. And what a pleasure that is.
I wonder, parallel this for me, if you will. I just got a sense that astrology really runs close to this kind of work. I have estimated through the years about 80% of my clients are people who've come into this lifetime to work on their own karma. About 17% are here to work on group karma, family karma, etc. And about the 2 or 3%, these are rough figures, are here because they don't have to be, they're just here to give back. Does that make kind of sense with you numerically?
Well, I haven't thought about it as far as percentages goes, because there's indeed so many reasons why not only people are coming back here and working on their karma, but, since we've got more than 7 billion people here, some agnostics and atheists and skeptics are doing the math, and they're saying, wait a minute, that's a lot of people here all at one time. However, I have to remind them that, you look out into the heavens and there are billions of other planets, other star systems all over the place. Yeah, and so we've got a bunch of people who are fairly new to the Earth. They're coming from other places, outer space, as it were. The interesting thing, however, connected to your question was some information that I got from Edgar Cayce, and I give him due credit in this first book as well as the second. And I imagine a lot of the people listening in are very familiar with Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, as he was called. Died in 1945, did readings for about 40 years, mostly over in Virginia Beach. I lived in Virginia Beach for about 9 years just to kind of soak in this wisdom, and got a lot of information, a lot of inspiration from Edgar Cayce and the readings. And one of the interesting things that I learned there and through reading the sessions that he made is that when we are not incarnated in the flesh, and then after death, we then go to various dimensions, spheres, equivalent to the planets. Therefore, we may go for a period of time to Mercury, Venus, Mars, and kind of take in kind of like the vibrations, the school exams of those particular planets, And then with that particular idea, that inspiration, that slant on things, then we come back into the body and we are reincarnated, but with these mental urges from our recollections, our time in these spaces called the planets. I'm of the opinion, however, that it's not necessarily our souls going to, let's say, the planet Mercury or Jupiter, but that there is a dimensional equivalent of those planets, and they represent what this means. You know, the Jupiter of expansion, ennoblement, high-mindedness, thinking big, wanting to get the big picture, international perspectives and so forth. And then having spent some time there, when we are incarnated here upon the earth, it can be reflected in our horoscope that, oh, Jupiter is prominent. It could be at the ascendant. It could be conjunct your sun or something like that. And it's not because the calculations is that, oh, how interesting that Jupiter is strong, but we as souls spent time on Jupiter.
I'm so interested in that because I read Cayce talking about astrology in the past. He would use phrases like the entity has not been in Neptune. That's how
Yes.
he put it. That's how he put it. And I couldn't ever understand what he meant. Has not been in Neptune. I'm glad you brought that up, and I understand what you're saying here. I'm so interested in your work with Cayce, and I've made some notes about you and he. I was so fascinated to find out that Mr. Cayce discussed Pluto in 1923 in your book, 7 years before the planet was known to us. It was not discovered in our world until 1930. How did he pull that off?
That's pretty fascinating. You know, he called it Septimus at the time.
Is that right?
That's right. It was also referred to Vulcan, but Septimus is the seventh planet out from Earth.
Oh.
So that, yeah, fascinating. 7 years before it was discovered.
Well, what I loved about Cayce is he spoke his own tune. He just spoke it as he saw it, and he's got this phenomenal chart. I would like to do a whole evening on his Pisces chart. I was really taken with the beautiful statements that he made. He was speak to us about how you wrote about him in your book, where he talks about we're here for a mission and a grand journey.
Yes, fascinating. Here we are having to go back now to the fall, the original fall. And from the Cayce perspective, you know, having souls, disincarnates, as it were, and by the way, entity and soul is interchangeable. And here were the souls curious, floating in the sky, looking down upon the earth, probably in a very primitive state, probably during the dinosaur age. And then they were very curious. Man, look what's going on down there. Here are beings, creatures in the flesh. I wonder what that would be like. And so then the curious ones go down and they enter into the bodies of the birds of that time, dinosaurs, animals, also fish in the sea, the whales of those times, probably even trees and so forth, just as a curiosity. And then it was so intense, it was so instinctual, it was so kill or be killed that they got either shocked into it, they got pulled into the earth, they got pulled into the material, and then they lost their recollection of their divinity. And then the second wave of souls seeing their brethren down and kind of like stuck in this chaos of life and death upon the earth, then they said, well, how can we redeem them? How can we help them? How can we, help them to get out of there? And so they started vibrating and evolving certain creatures, finally focusing upon the ape to speed up its evolution so that there can be a way, there can be a means that one can, through reincarnation, enter into these more evolved creatures, now called the hairless ape, the humans that we see here on the screen today. And then through time after time, having this opportunity to evolve and help each other. And the second wave, especially helping the first wave to remind them, yes, this isn't it. This isn't the whole show down here. There is a bigger picture. You're part of God. You're part of the One. You're part of the creative forces. And please come back. Please remember your divinity and come back home.
When I read the huge book called Urantia, many of you may have heard of it. It was channeled information. Big, thick book. And it describes the universe almost like this phenomenally huge corporation. There are souls watching you here, and your job here is to administer this and manage this, and it's unbelievably complex. Well, I was really shocked because in my reading, both 18 years ago and the other day, I revisited huge floating citadel in the sky. It was something like you might imagine the Death Star. In Star Wars, only thousands of times bigger. And I was walking through, and it was crystalline, and it was clear, and I was re-experiencing my parents, etc. But what amazed me is, I think Stephen has a real one-up on astrology by having the sun next to Saturn. People tell you all the time how bad Saturn is. I just don't think Stephen could do half the work he does without that sun Saturn, because it gives him the ability to identify. He knows where he is, and he says to me, Rick, you're inside a giant star. And if you're hot, what was that about? Was I in some big star?
Fascinating, huh?
Yeah, and I knew you were right.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the intelligent field of it or something.
Mm-hmm. And I must say that I wouldn't normally say that when someone's in a trance because I don't want to feed them information. But I knew that you would understand what I'm talking about. And so I was able to just go ahead and just say, I think I know where you're at.
But what fascinates me, Stephen, is your ability to float, your ability to maneuver so many different places. And you even said to me, I was really stunned in your book, about many times we are offered two bodies. We're given a choice of what kind of lifetime we want to have. It's like picking from the menu. Is that how this is between lives?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's really quite fascinating. And to back it up just a little bit, your Rancha equivalent, you're familiar with Michael Newton and his books, Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls. He also described an immense universe, souls very busy doing all sorts of things, having their study groups, their family groups, kind of like also equivalent to the placement of stars, galaxies, clusters, binary stars, and things like that. The whole array of billions of constellations and how these lights are aligned in the heavens. And they're equivalent of gathering places, teaching areas, universities, libraries, so forth. And one of the areas that one would, let's say, go to prior to going back into the earth would be the preparation area, kind of like the launching pad, the area where you would take a look at, okay, says the wise ones, based on what you have done, what you needed to do, the karma that you have accrued in the past, you and your soul group, your extended family, are going to be born, let's say, now in North America or Argentina or Germany, and it's going to be in a particular decade. And these are some of the things that you all are going to be working out. However, because of free will, because of the variety of things, because we have time for all of you, the whole group, to work on all of your things in your, let's say, varying ways, then we'll give you a menu, as it were. We'll give you a couple of different options. Michael Newton had talked about that. I went to my own preparation place And then I was given 3 options, and I described that in my book too. And one was a thoughtful professor in Sweden, and I saw this guy in his den, and there he was smoking a pipe, and he had kind of like a nice red sweater, and he was very thoughtful. And so that was one option that I had to be born that would start burning off some karma for me. But I would imagine it would be a little bit more safer, I think, more secure. My second option was a anarchist in northern Italy. And,
oh boy.
and I'm sure that would be pretty fun.
I was walking down the street in Rome on the day that Aldo Moro was assassinated, and I had a long beard, and the Red Brigade was out looking, and the policemen are looking around. I said, no, Americano, no. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
That day in 1978. So you...
and so I'm going to finish that. The third option was Stephen Poplin.
Well, you picked
and
the
obviously
right
I chose me.
Tell us briefly, what is your first book about? And I understand you're nearing completion on your second. What's the difference between the two?
Well, basically, about 3 years ago, I wrote so much that it was like a big book of 400 pages, and I said, this is too much.
I see.
So I just split it in half.
I see. That's very smart.
And but there's so much to it. I mean, we're talking about karma, we're talking about personal past lives, soul groups, relationships, soulmates, angels helping us, guides, guidance. There's just so many issues and themes that it just would take a lot of chapters to go over all of it, and it turned into volume 1 and volume 2 so far.
I'm so stunned by your ability. When you're guiding somebody, where are you? Are you? I read in your book that you said, "When I encounter their soul, I know I'm there, and I trust it." What does that mean?
I've come across also some people who were trying to hoodwink me. And some people have a very interesting sense of imagination. Some people have wishful thinking. You know,
don't hoodwink a Scorpio. No.
And it's a bit like when you're talking with people too, and when they're bullshitting you or when they're making up a story. And that can happen also in trance. There can be even sub-personalities that want to express themselves, as well as every now and then we've got a couple of entities hanging out nearby. The old word might be a possession. I'm not sure if I go that far, but there are some lost souls, there are ghosts, there are unhappy entities who are hanging out, and sometimes so close in consciousness that, people have got these multiple conversations going on inside their heads, and they themselves may not know, is this particular opinion coming from me, or is it from this person right over here, disincarnate, by my side. Anybody who also has done any work with the spiritualist church, doing psychic readings and so forth, know that, there's all kinds of souls all around there. And usually we're having, let's say, civil conversations with them that we ask, may I come to you? Would you please be of help? This person who I'm talking to, but sometimes they just latch on, and they can cause a bit of noise.
One of the things that I found really fascinating, it wasn't so much that I was in a trance. I mean, I can't do the dividing line. It was a whole lot like I really trusted you, and you really come out with a real strong tone of voice that's very reassuring, and I'm being guided, and I don't know where that line is, where Rick stops and he ends, but I didn't care, because I knew Stephen was taking me there. That was very comforting. I really liked that. I saw here, this is really fascinating. In your book, you said, when a soul is lost, sometimes I go up a level and talk to an angel or an archangel. Tell us about that.
Well, as I said, there's sometimes young souls and inexperienced souls. I've come across a couple of people, and they're on their second or third life down here on the earth. In spirit, they might be in kindergarten, which is pretty fun. And there's some really cute and rambunctious rascals incarnated down here. But sometimes when they really don't know what's going on, or they're a bit confused, then I always, go up the ladder. The spirit guide is oftentimes very nearby, and one can usually get most of the information from the guide. Sometimes there's also a junior guide that's kind of doing an apprenticeship thing.
That's what I felt. Wow.
Yeah, and that's also very interesting.
I couldn't believe when I read you said this. Listen to this. Sometimes lost souls are attracted to kids, to bars, to alcohol, drugs, and I couldn't believe the last one, to people under anesthesia. Well, that made me kind of like nervous about my next operation. Anesthesia, really?
That's right. All of these situations kind of lower one's
I see.
Let's say protective dynamics of how you're I call it the gateway, basically. And when one is open, let's say like a young child, very free, very open, very imaginative, very friendly, those sometimes invisible friends might be just from the imagination, and they might be actually other entities, lost souls, ghosts, and things like that. And then they can hang around and they can latch on to the kids, but it has to be by permission.
But how do you differentiate?
Yes, you have to say.
One phase you talk about, they can't take over unless you invite them. And the other phase we talk about, they can just attach to you. How do you differentiate the two?
Well, when let's say we're talking about a bar or anesthesia at the hospital, you're again not in your right mind. You're kind of floating around. Your sense of self is not so clear. This is me. That's not me. It's like, oh, we're all here together, and I'm kind of fuzzily right here, and this other being next to me is also fuzzily next to me, and so we can merge a little bit. Sometimes misery loves company, and so there can be some unhappy souls who are attracted to something similar that a person may have within themselves. Someone may be depressed or lost or post-traumatic stress disorder, and then there's these other souls that say, oh yeah, I can really relate. I'm going to hang out with you.
That really reminds me of the wonderful work in New York City that David Hawkins did with his 8 or 9 books. And he spent 50 years being a psychiatrist. He said, a lot of this that's going on is people's death wishes. And I looked around and I started to realize he's actually right. And what I mean by that is some people, for instance, might go into a bar and mentally what they're saying is, I don't care what happens. I don't care what happens. They kind of just I don't want any more responsibility for myself. And they put themselves in a dangerous mental frame. Mm-hmm. Is that what you see, sort of?
That's very true. And you probably recall just from the first couple of pages of that book that I came across a person, this was, probably 20, 25 years ago, who was telling me that they are not going to leave that battlefield. And and I'm saying, I'm doing the math here, and saying, well, if they're not leaving, but they're here right now, then what's happening, right? And so I found out that this person before me right now in the flesh was a ghost for 210 years. And I had to start to reassess, it's like, wow, what's going on here? The interesting thing also about that is when we think about disincarnates and entities and these souls that are kind of lost and so forth, many of them, if not most of them that I've come across, have once been in the flesh and then will reincarnate again. So that means that many people that we know, maybe even some of the people that are gathered here this evening, have been ghosts for a while. But of course, I would prefer to say some nice nature spirits, maybe some wood nymphs. That would be much interesting.
You make it all sound like such a happy place. I was really fascinated at the very beginning of your book, and I love the Sagittarius part of you, which comes out speaking the truth about Christianity and about the role of Paul. Was it Paul? Yeah. Paul. You were talking about what the church would be like with Paul's influence and without, and keeping in mind that Paul never met Jesus. That was fascinating.
Mm. Yeah, I must admit, I've got a background in philosophy, and so a lot of the older books, prior to like in the last 250 years, the philosophers, they would just go from subject to subject to subject, and they would put it all in a general idea of what the theme is. And so I do have a couple of asides.
Yes, such as you saying there is no religion that is monotheistic.
It took me a long time to figure that one out.
That rang true.
Yeah, there is no monotheism when you get right down to it.
Tell people why you said that about Christianity and Catholicism.
Yeah. Well, of course, when you take a look at other polytheistic religions like Hinduism, animism, certain forms of Tibetan Buddhism and so forth, they've got all kinds of gods and goddesses and hierarchies, and then the big ones, and then the little garden gods and your private altar in your home and so forth. So it's just filled with all kinds of deities and so forth. And so then when we take a look at the Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition, and we're talking about angels, archangels, cherubim, saints, the burning bush, all kinds of gods also. There's all kinds of spirits. They have a particular hierarchy. So my conclusion was that it's actually more of, a top-down, there shall be no God but Jehovah. And so it's more of a jealous God. It's more of like, I'm the number one, which is not the same thing as a monotheism. It's still a polytheism, but a bit more structured.
Don't you think, you know much better than I. I'm pretty much a straightforward astrologer. Doesn't it seem like the Earth is in a lot of trouble now, in a lot of ways, and they're helping us. They're trying to help us. And I know I'm trying to separate from the part of me that's saying, boy, they better help us. What evidence do you see that they are helping us? Is it individual basis? Is it the collective basis? Is it all those things?
In some respects, there is a hands-off policy.
Yes.
There is like the great big clock, and we as astrologers, we know about the great cycles and so forth. And then there is inspiration. We have all had synchronicities. We've all had these revelations. We've all had, these aha moments, that we say, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And then we are to go out there and do our best and to make a difference in our communities and our families and so forth. Very important. And then hopefully we're going to have a larger input upon the world and the world stage. At the same time, there are these younger souls and these brash souls, these impatient people, and they push themselves into positions of power. And then there will be some chaos. Interestingly enough, there are these windows, these doors that open that can be astrologically matched for a while. And these individuals will have their opportunity to make a big splash on the world scene. At the same time, there is wisdom. There's these, the higher beings. There is a lot of wisdom watching over things. My feeling is that if things get truly, truly out of hand, there shall be what's called miracles. There will be interventions. But
wow.
I believe that happens relatively rare, because certainly you look around and there's a lot of crap going on in the world. And so there is a bit of a hands-off policy.
Yes.
Well, kind of a sense that we, you know, a bit like a parent that sends the kids off to the school, and then, you know, they try their best, you know, when they're back at home to give them the good values and so forth. Now go off and be good kids. But then, you know, all kinds of stuff happens when the kids get together, right? and so they can't, you know, like totally control things, because we have got free will.
Yeah.
We can make choices. We can turn our backs upon the maker. We can do things opposite of what is the good thing to do.
Well, that's
our free will to do it.
Don't you think people forget to ask for help?
Oh, so often. So often.
So often. I mean, almost every time I ask for help, it's there. And I go, well, wow, I try to do it all by myself.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking with somebody about that a couple of months ago, and we were talking about parking angels. And and so I've used parking angels for years, and I always get a spot, you know. And then I was talking with a lady about this, and I said, "Well, have you thought about, like, you know, asking for larger things?" She says, "Oh no, I couldn't do that."
Yes, you can. Sure, you can. I'm very much interested in asking you a two-part question, and this really interests me. So many people, and I'm so grateful that I know I'm an astrologer, so many people are aching to find their mission. And I really try hard to help with that, and I think I do at times. What do you do with that area? How do you help people find their mission? Because they're dying for it.
Exactly. Yes, yes. You know, that's the really great thing that had happened for many years. I was doing past life regressions, going from one past life to the next past life, finding out about, you know, what did we learn? What were the lessons? What kind of karma? Who were we with? And so forth. And then we go to the next life. But when I got really more and more into the in-between periods, in the interlife, in the life between lives area, the great spirit world, that is where the action is. That is where the big plans are made. Those are figured out with the help of the great council, the wise ones, the elders, as well as through agreements with your own soul group. And then you come back into the earth, but with that idea that you've got the mission already planned.
Well,
and that my focus mostly then, because that's, you know, that's one of the favorite questions, by the way. What is my mission? What is my?
Of course.
Yeah.
And what really stunned me was how much Stephen accomplishes with a smile. Because in my last 18 years ago, in my last weekend, I was reminded of being in between lives. Stephen was on my right, and I'm sitting there on a cliff, and on my left was this tremendous waterfall, roaring. And Stephen kind of insinuated, "Are you ready? Are you ready for your next lifetime?" I said, "No, I'm not." And Stephen just smiled at me. It felt like he pushed me, but he didn't. He just smiled at me with this feeling of, "You can do it. Here we go. Woo!" I mean, is that a common experience with you?
No, you're pretty special, Rick. You are very nice to guide. You are up there. You are, you know, interacting, and you've got this consciousness during your travels.
Do
and
you got people going like this, hold on? Do you got people holding on like, "I don't want to go, I don't want to go"?
There's people like that, and then there's people saying, "Oh, there's this curtain in front of me. I really can't get behind it. I can't see it. I can't see it. I can't do it."
Really?
Yeah, and although a bunch of others who are saying, "Oh, I really do. I do want to learn. See you later."
I just looked at his smile and I said, "The damn thing must be okay," because he's smiling and I, woo. Now, my part two of that question is, as an astrologer for years, I tried to help people. What's my mission? I tried to match Capricorn with a Capricorn type of job and a Pisces with a Pisces type of job. And I found out in the last several years that was wrong. And I've had much better success following and digging up what is their trauma. People want to work where their trauma was. And their trauma is no accident, whether they were raped or whether they were poor or whether the house burned down or what. People want to work almost like to correct that. Is that what you find?
That's true. Very true. And of course, some of the trauma can happen, of course, in our present lives. Divorce, with being beaten up, abused, all kinds of things. And of course, it goes into a larger dimensional perspective when we go into past lives, and then into difficult times on other planets, other dimensions. And so one can bring back into your everyday life a load of stuff, and it can be layers to get through it. The interesting thing that I think a lot of psychologists are working with would be that which is only limited to our present life, but you start moving backwards into, what did you suffer in the 1700s? I mean, it really brings in a whole different level of things. And that's part of, what I'm doing too. I've developed what's called transpersonal journeys. And we start off in the same typical way as I would, starting off with a past life regression, going into a trance state, getting in touch, hopefully, with your higher self, with maybe accompanied by your soul guide. And then at that point, there may be a block. It may be stopped. Someone is saying, I'm here, but I can only feel my body. I seem to be like here inside of my consciousness, And so very likely, there is something that needs to be resolved before we take off.
Yeah, I saw you wrote in the book that some people are so stuck that they got to resolve something before it would be rushing them to attach them with their soul.
Exactly. And some people are a little bit disappointed, because they, book a past life regression with me, but then we end up dealing with, what happened when they were 12.
Money back guarantee.
But it was very important for them to go ahead and deal with that. And I'd have to say that their the wisdom within, the soul inside knows what it's doing, and it set up the whole thing so that they could deal with that particular issue.
Well, it's fascinating. I just got a few more questions, and I'm glad because I want to open it to the group with their questions. But I got about 6 or 7 more here that are really fascinating. I find that people are so eager to help. They can tell that if they sense you're sincere and you're really trying to work with them to dig up the blockages and stuff, I find their subconscious mind is just so ready to work with me. You must find that too.
Are you talking about human?
Just working with a client.
Mm-hmm.
With the subconscious, they're ready to reveal things to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
They really want to work, and they can sense, if you're sincere, they can sense the working together, what it's going to be like.
Exactly. Yeah, very good, very important. And that's the really great and inspirational thing, that once we get past our, let's say, sense of isolation and ourselves as an individual separate from the universe, and we start like stretching out, we have got so much help on the other side.
Boy, that's so good to hear. Wow. You said, I want to ask you this question. Is it common that when a mother's in trouble communicating with the daughter, for example, that you tell the mother to talk with the child's guide?
Yes.
Is that true?
And that has actually been a useful thing every now and then, when there is kind of a person who is a stand-in, as it were. I had that a couple of times where the child was handicapped in certain ways and wasn't really able to have a session themselves. I also had a situation where a a guy that I was working with was very blocked. We could not get anywhere. I knew that he was in a trance state because he couldn't move his arm. I mean, I have a couple of these, hypnotic tests that one can do, but he just did not get anything. So his wife was a very good traveler. And so she did a session for him. She basically, in kind of like a shamanic manner, she kind of journeyed and got his past life information.
Wow.
He was stuck because he had been so beaten in a past life in Mongolia that he was shut down and just shocked. And he was going through several lives since then of kind of laying low, having very inconspicuous lives, no big challenges. He's not going to run for office. He's just going to have a simple life because he overdid it and he created some negative karma in the past. So she was able to journey for him, and these other people, as I had said, were able to find out about the past lives and the karma of their incapacitated children.
That's fabulous. You wrote something that really moved me. I've heard it similar before with Yogananda. What do you mean? I'm not going to try to interpret it. God is moved by our prayers, and he knows himself, he or she knows himself better because of it, and becomes pleased with himself more by watching you develop.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? Because that's a philosophical, tricky one.
Mm-hmm. I believe that we are corpuscles in the body of God. We are cells in the greater body of God. Here upon Gaia, there are 7 billion of us, but there's lots of other sentient creatures too. Each of us, very similar to a nerve cell, taking in, learning, growing, perceiving, loving, laughing, dancing, and all of that nerve energy, all of these perceptions are following our corpuscle, our nerve cells, back to the Godhead, back to God itself, and then God delighting in us and learning about the kingdom, learning about life through us. We are the messengers, as it were.
I can see this now. Why did the West become, because of all this, as religion moved westward, why did the West become so threatened by reincarnation?
Well, that's a big question, I must admit, and I can answer it partly because I am a hypnotist and looking at mass hypnosis and how different organizations and institutions can control the masses.
That's an avenue.
And there we go, right there. For instance, with we'll just pick on the Catholic Church for a little bit, and because it's just so big. And it was so important for so many centuries, kind of laid the groundwork there. Reincarnation and some other more spiritual things were edited out of the Bible because if one can redeem themselves, if someone can, through karma, through good deeds, through good works, just kind of do it themselves, then you really don't need the hierarchy of priests and the bishops and so forth, pay the penance and so forth, and bow down to your betters. So it was a control thing for centuries and centuries, and I think that is where most of it kind of disappeared.
That makes a lot of sense, and then you have Constantine.
Yeah.
Just a couple more things. This is a very much bantied about word. I don't like the word, and I feel it's very abused. What do you think of when you think of karma?
Oh, karma, very fascinating. It's I think it's almost like in a magical category in many people's minds, many people's consciousness. Because it's something that we have to pay off. It's like something so big, it's usually negative karma. But
yeah.
basically, karma means action. And that means good and bad. It could be positive, could be negative. It just depends on what you do. We can create positive karma right here, right now. Typically what we up against is the negative karma. And I think of it also as like a magnet. And we have, remember, the positive and negative poles of the magnet. And when you can either be repelled by a magnet, get two magnets together, or you could be pulled in very strongly with that same magnet. And that is a bit how karma works. One has really strong interactions, dynamics, let's say, abuse and killing in one life, you will meet that person again in a future life, and it will be like a magnet. There's no way around it. You're going to meet that person.
Why?
Because you built it. You created it. It's a charge, okay? And you set it into motion. And the interesting thing about that is that when you get to a place where you have let go of the karma, you're going to a place of neutrality. And that's where forgiveness comes in. That's when you can just say, you have done me wrong, and I'm not going to get pulled into the drama anymore. I'm going to stop it right here. I'm just going to say, okay, the buck stops here. I'm going to let it go. Well, I go to a place of neutrality. And then we're getting closer to Buddha and his detachment perspective.
Okay, wonderful. I just got a couple more things here. Tell us about your I know your website is Transpersonal. I'll put that link back up for people in case they want to see your particulars. Tell us about transpersonal.us/reveries.
Okay, yes. Years ago, I had the good fortune of hanging around some musicians and some people who were very comfortable on stage. And this is during my sojourn in Virginia Beach. And so I had taken an aspect of my induction, helping people to get into that trance state, to get in touch with their higher self, to get into that very peaceful place, recognizing that it wasn't, it could go towards, let's say, this transpersonal journey, and one can access the great wisdom and have wonderful conversations with Maria, Jesus, Krishna, whomever, the archetypes. And so I created this reverie, and it's on my website. There's two right now. One is a winter reverie, one is a summer reverie, and it's about 30 minutes each with a bit of music, my voice, helping people to get into this altered state of awareness, and then having a period of time of quiet so that the wisdom can come in. You can talk to your spirit guide, you can ask for advice, you can ask for a download of positive, loving energy, all kinds of things that you can do during that refreshing 30-minute meditation.
Very good. Just two final things, and this one really fascinates me. I've been thinking a lot lately by watching a lot of crime shows, almost like if you do crime anymore, they're going to find you somehow. And Liza and I have been talking about how you've got to be leaving a trace in the air, and I bet you in the future they're going to know if you've been in this room somehow. And I'm reading a lot about nanotechnology, where your mirror is going to be able to tell you when cancer is starting in your body by looking in the mirror in the morning. And you talk about how the Akashic Records is a trail of trace of you through time and space. And I have a sense that that's going to come into play with criminology.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, this could be a great science fiction story.
Does that make any sense to you?
Well, it certainly does. In fact, I'd have to say that Edgar Cayce and other gifted psychics, that's how they work. They follow the Akasha and the Akasha.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's where they're getting the information. And the interesting thing about that is that we do leave a trail, okay? And here we are working with time and space. And right now, we are sitting in front of our consoles, sitting in front of our laptops. And so in time and space, right here, right now, on this May day, 2018, we are sitting here. And so in this particular place, on this chair in this room, that is now set. That is being recorded on the Akasha. And as soon as we leave this room after an hour, then this chair will be empty. This room may be empty for a while, and that is also recorded, and it's going to follow us wherever we happen to go next as we continue to surf the now. I love that term. I think I made it up, but I'm not sure. When you surf the now, you're putting all of your consciousness right here and right now. And when you are off driving your car, you're surfing at that time and place in that little box going down the road. Now, this now is the Akashic records. And if we have someone very intuitive, more towards the psychic realms, they can, hook into that personality, astrology chart perhaps, and then follow it back, back to age 40, age 30, age 20, and find those particular key events. It's all there. It's all in time and space, and it will be there forever. That is the Akasha.
Mr. Poplin, we did not find your fingerprints or your DNA, but we know you were here.
That's it.
May of 2018, you were in that chair. The final thing I want to say is a beautiful thing you said in your book, and then we'll open it up for questions. You said there's no rush. There's no rush to evolution because we're all going to make it.
That's it. Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah. So that is very reassuring on one level, but at the same time, here we are. Sometimes,
My mistake. Go ahead.
Okay, some people are suffering. Some people are having really rough times, and you wonder, when is this going to end? As we've already discussed, sometimes some people are burning off some karma, and then at other times we are dealing with things what seems to be out of our control. But the big picture is that spirit or God, the great creative force, has so much time and the eternity, close to eternity. And so if we don't figure it out now, we can figure it out later. If we don't understand exactly what's going on or within our families, then we can say, well, okay, next lifetime.
So don't freak out. It's like I don't know about you, but I get an awful lot of Virgo women calling for astrology readings. And I tell them, we start with stage one, and stage one is, I got to get the dishes done. We try to change that to, I got to get the dishes done. Calm down. Well, thank you so much for part one of tonight. I really appreciate that so much. I'm going to open you up, and I want to encourage you to keep your questions brief. Direct them right at Stephen about something that he stirred up with you, something we talked about tonight. What would you like to know? And I want to get to as many people as possible. You can raise your hand. You can click on the button that says raise hand either way. Angel, go ahead, buddy. This is Angel, and I'll take care of unmuting you. Let's see, I hope. Let me try. I'm trying. It's trying. There you are. You're on, Angel, with Steve.
There we go.
I'm very interested in your conception of time, because while you were mentioning Cayce, I was thinking of Jane Roberts and her communications with Seth,
right?
And the thing with Newtonian and particle physics, because in your explanation, it seems like time is serial. And what is your thinking on that instead of being serial, that maybe they are parallel and they are happening all at once, because time is not really an equation in that kind of view of the universe. That's my first question. And the second one is concerning the advice, because the other day I was talking to a couple of particle physicists, and they were saying that when the atomic bomb was exploded, that event rips the fabric, the very, very, very fabric of the universe, and it rips it in materiality, time, and space, and it has an effect on everything.
Let's take part one, Angel, because this is a really big question. Go ahead, Stephen, with part one of that question.
Okay, good. Time. Well, time is a dimension, and it is, I think, God's way of making sure everything doesn't happen at once. And so time is one of three dimensions here upon the earth. And as long as we're in the body, we're going to be not only, let's say, having to follow the laws of gravity, follow the laws of physics right here, in our material world, in our material bodies, but we're also having to the confines of time itself. So I believe that, as we were talking about the Akashic records, and partly it's upon time and space, both. And so it's always there. When I contact, especially some spirit guides, some very high level souls working with my clients, we play with time. We go back in time. On one level, we are recollecting what has happened in the past. But one can say, in a limited manner, that, okay, the past is the past, it's done, that's it. However, I have had several situations in which we were able to shift the dynamics in a past event, so that, as some hypnotists say, it is never too late to have a happy childhood. and one can really kind of go back in time, usually with some very high-minded help, and kind of redo things. Mm-hmm. Now, because the Akashic record is just made, we really can't change the past. Oftentimes we can change our reactions to it, our perceptions of it, getting a new angle on it, very much like a photographer would look at it in a new view. And then you might, let's say, go from being a victim into recognizing, oh, well, that was a difficult time and I was being rather stubborn. And so lesson was learned. And so that's how one can work with time. The other interesting thing, again, to bring up Edgar Cayce, he talked about the three dimensions of being an earthling. And one dimension is time here on the earth. The second dimension is space, and that is our physical form, 3D. And the third dimension here on the earth is patience.
Wow.
How about that?
I didn't expect that one.
I must
explain, Lucy.
That got me scratching my head for a decade at least.
Where'd that come from? Time, space, and patience.
And patience. Here's the thing, that patience is a dimension. I mean, what a deal that is. Now, when I had to, let's say, psychologically, intellectually, philosophically kind of work with that, I had to then start looking at the various life lessons over periods of time. And we were talking about, we've got plenty of time. And so you have to have patience right now. It's all going to be okay eventually.
Okay, really good. Forgive me, I want to move on because I want everybody to get a chance. Okay. Margaret, I believe you were next. Thank you, Angel. Margaret, and then Elke, I believe, was after her. Margaret, go ahead. You're on with Stephen.
Hi, when I was in my 30s, I became very acutely claustrophobic, not because of a
Speak up, please.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
When I was in my mid-30s, can you hear me now?
I can hear you better.
I became.
And I can see the ceiling.
Yeah, I know. That's all. That's. I became profoundly claustrophobic, and it takes a long time for me to get recovered from that. But someone had told me that that could be because it happened in my mid-30s, that maybe it was from a prior life. Is that been your experience?
That is definitely my experience. My first question or two would be, did something happen about a couple of months or a year before you got claustrophobic? And sometimes one can find something there psychologically. But I've got a whole chapter in this book about time, and specifically ages, and when at a certain age something happens, something shifts. Mm-hmm. Someone goes into a particular issue, and in your case, claustrophobic. It reminds me of a case that I had in which a woman was in an avalanche at a particular age. I think it was 22, and then she was alive under the avalanche for several hours before then she, of course, died. Mm. And so in her present life, she got up to that same age, 22, and then there was this unconscious trigger that went off that says, oh my goodness, I should be freaking out. Definitely, I don't think she went skiing that particular year. But she had that wave of panic that came from being, underneath tons and tons of snow. And so that explained to me where that came from. And then once we figured that out, then we were able to work with that past life personality and free them. Kind of like, even though materially the body is not going to be freed, but the soul can be freed. And there can be, again, a new slant on those last very troubling hours of life, and release the pain, release the fear, the panic, and then transfer the positive feelings and the release to the present personality, the self right now.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but after I've learned through the years, it's not so much what's in the chart. It's really a whole lot about the past life. Thank you, Margaret. Well, next up is Elke. Elke, go ahead, dear. You're on with Stephen.
Hi, yes, I love this. This is right up my alley. It's so fascinating. I have read somewhere, and I don't know if that's true or not in your experience, that the souls, the ascendant is a constant. Is that true, that we're born always like with the same ascendant, and that we kind of hang out at times in the area of our ascendant, or does it show like a prime focal area of our very soul that remains like solid? Mm-hmm. Have you seen that or not?
Elke, soll ich auf Deutsch antworten oder was?
Ja, kannst du ruhig, aber dann haben die anderen ja keine Ahnung.
That's not fair.
Okay, so one, of course, as an astrologer and a past life regressionist, I've always been fascinated, with the personality, the situations, the life lessons in a past life, and does that carry over into our present life, into our chart? And the tricky thing is, I'm sure you've done some rectifications. It's sometimes very difficult to get an accurate rectification of a chart, the actual birth time of the. Mm-hmm. So imagine you're going into another life 400 years ago. It has to be really given on high exactly what that past life astrology chart would look like. And even if I did get it, I wouldn't know really if it would, so it's really a very difficult thing to ask about. However, I have found certain patterns in life where people, let's say, who are present day Leos, and in past lives, they were up against things that had bruised their self-esteem. They were embarrassed in public, or they were shamed in front of a bunch of people. And then they're born as a Leo, and they're going to work on their expression. They're going to work on presentation. They're going to work on, kind of getting over some of their issues and their insecurities. So I've seen that many different times. But we're talking about generalities of issues, and now I happen to know, because I always ask when I do when I do the intake, when were you born? So I get this information, so I know many times at least their sun sign. Then I can also figure out stelliums and aspects and so forth, and then I know what the past life was. So that could be a whole rich area of past lives and those lessons and experiences and difficulties, and now the present life astrology chart. Now, I'd have to say also, just specifically about ascendants, is that many times we're being, let's say, rubbed, polished like a mirror or like a lens in the buildup of our personal ascendants by members of our family, number one, and specifically whoever was a very strong influence in your life, a strong personality, would be described on your descendant. And how you reacted, how you were polished, how you lived through that is going to be what we now see as the characteristics of your ascendant. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah, because I was thinking about the rays. There's certain archetypal patterns, and we do question, like, do people stick with these patterns? Do they always stay of the same archetype, or do they vary? Do they try out different roles? And I would think that they probably would try out different roles, right?
They do try out different. Yeah. And one thing that I found out when I did my first Life Between Life session with in the Michael Newton training, is that I knew as a past life regressionist that I had many times I was a monk or I was a, and then I recalled other times in which I was a warrior, a soldier, and then when I was in this LBL session, I found out that there was the series of scholars, the series of warriors. And so that kind of like made me rethink that. It wasn't like some sort of random sort of thing, or I try a little bit of this, try a little bit of that, but there is a series of in which that you, let's say, specialize in. And then if, in my case, it's like when I got too aggressive, then it was time to get into a smaller body and start using the brain again. And then I would move over towards a scholar life.
All right. Well, thank you.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I want to move on. Thank you, Elke. Next up on the question list was Susan Aver. Susan, you're on with Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you.
Hi, Susan.
Really interesting. I have a little bit of difficulty in determining the difference between a past life memory or an experience of mediumship in which you're being given a vision of someone else's life. Mm-hmm. I've got some training in mediumship, but I've had 3 experiences with past life, one through regressive hypnosis a billion years ago, and 2 through dreams. And the dreams were, one I was like 8 years old, and the other one I was about 20, and I still remember them like it happened yesterday. Every second of it was so clear, it was so real.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Susan. When I think you're on the right track when you have that inner knowing and you say, oh, this is so true, this is really right on, and then that gives it more credence. And hopefully a good psychic is going to get that same information to the point where you can say, oh, that I hear that for the first time, but it sounds true.
Yeah.
Then what we're doing is like an inner tuning fork. Our own soul animating us says, yes, that's right. Yes, that's true.
The 2 dream experiences were different from the one experience through regressive hypnosis. And then I had a very strange deja vu experience that was so clear, that would have to have been overlapping time period with one of those dreams. And none of this makes sense to me. They can't all be right.
I have a couple of theories about deja vus. And of course, I'm sure we have all experienced them. They're really quite fascinating. And one perspective, maybe a hypothesis, is that a God, the great God, it, is kind of like looking around, perceiving, imagine a great searchlight, and that searchlight beam is then directed with God's consciousness upon you, the personality. And at that second, because of course it's so fabulous, it's so strong, you're going to feel it like a deja vu. And in God's consciousness, it's like, oh, I have been here before.
Yeah.
Could be one example of why deja vu experiences occur.
Interestingly, I did get confirmation of information from one of those dreams decades later.
Mm-hmm.
I dreamt that I was Asian, I'm assuming Chinese. I was in a little bitty room with just a desk and a tiny little cot, and I'm brushing my hair looking in a mirror, so I'm seeing my face and long hair. And outside, there's all this commotion, and Japanese soldiers are coming, kicking open each door and gunning down what I know to be other women like myself in each of these little rooms. And trucks are revving up engines, and they're loading up and getting out of there real fast. And I know what I had done, but I didn't have a word for any of it. And when I tried to look it up in those days, there was no internet, no information. But since about 10 or 15 years ago, information has come forward that there were comfort women that were taken by the Japanese soldiers, but supposedly they never killed them before they left. So that's the one piece that doesn't fit with what I saw and felt. I was just waiting for my gunshot.
Very powerful. I'm sure that you must have physically, emotionally felt that. And again, that would be confirmation of a past life recall. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, when I'm doing these sessions and someone tells me a story like that with such conviction and with so many memories and feelings associated with it, that is one of those things that I'd have to say, we're on the right track. And that is the voice that I'm listening to that says, yeah, I believe that. Rick, is there someone else? Susan's.
I'm up.
Okay.
Stephen, I just have a question. The conversation might go back to where you started. I've been in contact with the Storr family since '97, and I'd like to give you a go around and get some hypnosis. I'm going to start working with Mary Rodwell. She's a world renowned person who does hypno regression with hybrids, with star seeds, who have experience. They're called experiencers. So I guess my question is, what would you offer me coming from that type of framework for my personhood and my soulhood?
And you identify yourself as a hybrid?
No, I believe I'm a star seed, and like I've had very interesting experiences since I was 4. And I don't really want to go into it right now, but I don't really feel I'm a hybrid. I've had dreams where a sphere landed in my front yard, and a person had come out. They looked Lemurian almost, but we hugged, and there was like a huge heart chakra connection where everything vibrated in my body and then out to the universe when I hugged this person. And he said, I'm really glad to meet you again. But he was actually looking for his children. So I don't know. It's a mishmash, even with the people who've been studying this for 30 years. But, I just wanted to know what, if I did get some hypnosis from you, what would you offer me? And I have had human lives as well.
What's the question for Stephen?
What would he offer me within the framework?
What would you offer her with this regard?
Within the framework of my experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now we'd have a cosmic surfboard ready. because we're going to have a very interesting trip, going far away, and specifically working with where you have been and where you have come from. And very similar to how some people are, interested in from past lives upon the earth, and what did they learn, who were they with, what lessons, and so forth. And now we are incarnated into the present body. What does it all mean, and what is our mission here? With you and with other starseed people, with other hybrid people, with people who have had experiences on other dimensions, other planets, then it would be a variation of a theme, because right now we are in the third dimension. Right now we are in our bodies, and there are probably some specific reasons why you have incarnated as Susanna. And that's probably where we would go. Recognizing that it's up to your higher self. And if your higher self wants to take off to some other place and have a nice recollection of some star somewhere, then that is really up to you, and that's really fine. But typically, and this is where I'm the Scorpio Sun Saturn fellow, usually you have come to me for a particular reason, and I'm going to be kind of like your advocate down here upon the earth, to find out what would Susanna like to know.
Okay. So it sounds like you come from a very client-centered type of framework in your work.
That's true. It's like I'm here to be of service to what the person would like to get. Recognizing sometimes that if someone comes to me and they're going to be asking me in a trance session, should I buy that home or not? Very likely it's not going to happen, because oftentimes spirit is not interested in real estate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Suzanne. I want to take the next question from Mark, and then we'll probably have time for one more person if you'd like to raise your hand. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, I've listened intently, and I'm wondering if you might be able to shed some light on this. So I'm one of these people that has very lucid dreams, but they're not first person. They're almost always third person. So I'm in an observer role. And these are not dreams of anything that I can relate to present day incarnation, putting it in those terms. So in your experience, would that be a reflection of my dreams being channeled from somebody else's experience, or would they be channeling a past or a future life?
Very fascinating there, Mark. One could say that you might even be doing some astral traveling. I have had many situations where, not necessarily with lucid dreaming, but with these sessions, which are very similar to like a lucid dream. And sometimes they meet a past life personality and they come upon them from behind. It's like, here is my past life, and I'm about 30 feet away coming from behind. And then there's other times in spirit when the soul is after a life and they're meeting all of their soul family, and they're meeting dear ones and so forth, but they're not seeing themselves. And so a trick I have used in the past is to ask in spirit for a magic mirror, is doing the observing. And you can do that also in a lucid dream, to observe yourself. Who is this person observing? And typically what I have found is that is your soul. That is your higher self doing the traveling itself. And of course, very much, or in a variation of, here we are looking through our eyes, and I'm not sure what my face looks like unless I look at a mirror, unless I look at a digital screen here. In the disembodied form, again, we're focused out there and we're observing, perceiving, and so forth. And every now and then, give yourself the opportunity to say, just a second, can I have a mirror, please?
Hey, that's fabulous, really interesting. Thank you, Mark. I want to go over to Deborah. Had her any question next.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I have been regressed. It was quite some time ago. And 2 sessions, and I was amazed that I could hear the bus outside. I could hear things going on, but I really got carried you deep. And anyway, I won't give you all 4 scenarios that, but they were all similar in that I was alone, completely on my own. But in the very last one, I was standing before a big wrought iron gate, and way up on the hill was a big castle that to me seemed like I was being invited to go in, but I felt, oh my God, if I go in, I'll never come back out again. That it would be like religion or politics or something that would just completely overtake me. And so I was hemming and hawing and hemming and hawing. And then I finally said, no. And I let go, and I turned into pixie dust and just dissolved into the forest behind me. And all this time, I'm not haunted by this, but I kept hoping I would get some clarity about what that meant. And I'm still still figuring it out.
Well, I put on my detective cap, and with the experience that I've had, I would have a couple of educated guesses about what was going on here. We were talking before about the Akashic records and coming to that point where something really big was about to happen. And typically, when I ask people to go back into a relevant past life, we have so many days that are just so days, right? But then we have a couple of moments, key days, key periods of time that are so life-changing, so important. And those are typically really embedded or imprinted into our consciousness, and so very important memories. So when we do go back to a relevant past life, it's going to go to a very important recollection. My guess is that when you were before that gate, ready to go inside that castle grounds, very likely you did go in and you knew it was not going to turn out well. And at the end of that particular life, you left the body and turned into a pixie dust. You've gone back to that recollection, that memory just before you went in. And how many times have we all second guessed and said, I wished I had not have done that. And I believe on a soul level, we can do that too. And very likely you did go in there. You did have probably a very bad experience. And when it was finished, you said, oh, I am glad to be gone.
You have now earned a new nickname, Deborah. You know that. We're going to call you Pixie Dust. One final question came from Barbara. She wants to know, can anybody, I think the answer is yeah, but you're the expert. Can anybody access the Akashic if their intent is pure?
I believe so. And, there are, I can also say that everybody can do math. Some people are math geniuses, and some people are really struggling with, divide and subtract. So we all can't be like Edgar Cayce, but there are many people who can be very good travelers, good shamans, good journeyers. And I think also with the proper intent, doing some meditation experiences, taking perhaps some classes. I personally took a series of classes at the Spiritualist Church with the psychic development, and I found that very useful for many years. And so various things to just hone the machine, and then with practice makes perfect.
We have to ask you what you haven't done. A final question is, would you be surprised if you found out this group was a traveling soul group?
That would totally make sense with me, especially if you meet once a week and it's the same group.
We're pretty tight. We're pretty good, and we have people of all walks. I got to thank everybody. It's been just so marvelous, and I'm so glad to reunite with you, Stephen, and so appreciative of you joining us. I apologize to anybody that couldn't get to. I try to get everybody a little bit of time. Please come back and join us if we beg you real nice. We'd love to have you back if you can do so. I know you're very busy. Once again, I'll put your vitals up here so people can get a hold of you. Stephen Poplin out of Iowa, and that world traveler off to Austria soon. Thank you so much for being with us, everybody. Thank you listening watching on YouTube. This will be lined up on YouTube tomorrow on Rick DiClemente's page. And once again, triple time. Thank you so much, Stephen.
My pleasure.
Rick, don't forget to mention Rebecca is going to be on next.
Oh, yeah, you're exactly right. She's on my notes, too. That's right. Next week is going to be awesome. Rebecca makes the cards jump off of her table.
Excellent.
The tarot cards, they start jumping. Sometimes she uses 3, sometimes she uses 9. She breaks all the rules, just like Stephen, but it'll be great. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks, Stephen. Good night, everybody.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Good night, everybody.